What's up, people? Welcome to another episode of Humbledad Podcast, where we building legacy and having solution-based conversations. Today, we're diving into one of the most needed but avoided topics in the church, and that's what's really going on in marriages. I'm joined by the bold and unapologetic voice of "I am mistaken," and we're tackling everything the church isn't talking about but should be. And before we get started, here's the intro.
The boy is dangerous.
Bad feeling about this.
You don't seem to understand something.
The thing that I like most about being a dad is that I see that I'm about to impact the world. Yep. What's up? Let's bring on to the stage. I'm mistaken in the building. What's going on, Miss Lady? How are you this evening?
I am good. I'm a little nervous this go around. I don't know why, but
Why? Why are you nervous? That's crazy. That's surprising for real. What would you have
really,
to
I
be
don't
nervous
know. I don't know what this is, but yeah, I do feel a little, a little nervous because sometimes I, like you said, I get too real,
Well,
and
that's what's
depending on
needed.
the way the direction this conversation goes, I don't know.
I'm I'm not gonna spin it any type of way. I really just want to
Okay.
have a conversation. Now, I used to like I understand on when we do panels and things of that nature that
Mhm.
there I do having some type of perspective that I'm trying to see where people will go. But this is really where I want you to do a lot of the particular dialogue. I'm gonna ask questions and interject, but it's more so to get your particular perspective on some of the things that we've talked about before, you know. And so I'm
Mhm.
just interested to see what you have to say, right?
Okay.
Right. And so a lot of things that we typically talk about is centered around like biblical stuff and church things as it relates to marriage and relationships. So my first question is what's the one thing about marriage you wish the church would address?
That is a good question. Um, Honestly, it's not that I don't think the church address it, but I don't think that they address it deeply. Like in terms of, um, can I keep it real? Like you said,
All the time, please. All the time. If you're
I
gonna
would,
be fake, that ain't even no point.
I would say sex is a topic that I don't think churches address a lot. I think, in fact, they avoid it. And the only thing that you typically get if they do touch it is more, no pun intended, is along the lines of like, you know, the bed is undefiled, or it's always approached from a biblical scripture standpoint of saying the bed is undefiled, or be fruitful and multiply,
Mhm. Yeah,
refrain from having sex until you get married, and that's about it.
yeah. That makes
That's
sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
I see that. And what's crazy is that that was one of the questions that I was going to ask as it relates to that. It was going to,
Mhm.
uh, seriously, it's probably going to be like the second or third question, which is why do you still think that the topic of sex is taboo when it comes to Christian marriages? So, what are your thoughts on that? Why do you think
um
we talk about it that
hmm, I think it's taboo because we've over sexualized everything
way?
to the point that now just having a general conversation about it becomes very, I guess, becomes very taboo. We haven't normalized something that's very normal, right? Um, we we put parameters around it. We speak in code about it. But then for somebody who, let's say, isn't experienced, right? That the expectations around that, you can't really ask questions or know what to expect, like, things like that. Then the other side of it is I'm gonna say most of the time, especially this day and age, most people who are having sex, are doing it before marriage.
Yeah.
So then there are different proclivities that develop because of that. So
Yeah.
I think that's something else that the church can kind of have discussion about, because if you're dealing with somebody on either side, man or woman, who haven't had a lot of experience, there's an expectation of probably the one who's been experienced
Mm,
um, would want the other partner to have, and they are not that skilled, they're going to be learning, and they may have boundaries around that, because there may be a level of just uncomfortability,
yeah. Yeah.
um and that can create issues for somebody who's used to doing some things. So
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that what you're saying has a lot of necessary conversation to have, because if you just tell somebody not to have sex, and you just say be fruitful and multiply, uh, and you're not talking to people about what's going to happen as a result of you having premarital sex, or even the advantages of having sex within the marriage and what God says about that, then people are, but they're looking for, uh, I guess, excuses to explore, because otherwise they don't really. They would say, well, why would he give me this urge and I'm not able to explore it, right?
mhm,
So I think that if there was boundaries or conversations around, not even boundaries, because I think it's important, especially, I mean, it's a whole book about it in Song of Solomon. You know,
mhm.
you read Song of Solomon, it's a book about sex, right? And how much he loves,
Let me write that down. No.
yeah, and how much he loves his wife, basically,
Mhm,
and how intimate he wants to be with his wife. So I think that's very important. I don't even think I've heard too many pastors dive into the book of Song of Solomon.
mhm.
So it's definitely something that's definitely needed. So would you say, because I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but there has been a current study that says that there is sexless marriages, right? And it's a growing thing, I guess, is what it was saying. So if you was to talk to church members, would you think, or Christians, I would say, or believers, how you want to put it, would you say that sex would be considered a duty, a desire, or would you say it's a spiritual weapon?
You mean in terms of what the church is pushing?
Yes.
Um, hmm. I Okay, so a lot of times my conversation, or a lot of times, is about the impact or differences that men and women share,
Yeah.
right? That impact. So I think the messaging around sex, just in society as a whole, but especially I would say in the church, is very different
Mhm.
for women. And I can honestly say, even for me, I'm not going to sit here in front like I was a virgin when I was before I got married. I wasn't.
Yeah.
But the crazy thing is that I thought the guilt that I felt having premarital sex would go away once I got married.
Ah, that's a good one.
And that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Um,
Good.
so I think a lot of times, especially as women, the pressure to be pure, the pressure to make sure you're a virgin is so much heavier um, on females maintaining their virginity, not
Mm,
than it is for boys, even within the church.
okay.
And so in the beginning, for me, I struggled a lot with like, oh, the bed is undefiled. Like, yeah, you could say all of that, but when you're living all the years prior to that in guilt and shame for doing something that you were brought up to say that you're not supposed to engage in until you marry, it just doesn't turn off as soon as
Yeah.
you get married, which I was naive to believe. Well, I didn't know that it wasn't.
Yeah. How is there any way to know? Because I would say the same thing. The different. There is not much difference between being single and being married as it relates to how you approach certain things, right? For example, as it pertains to how your mind works with sex, it's not going to just automatically change because you said some vows because you're still the
Mhm.
same person. But that's hard to understand that because you're not over there, right?
Right.
Something that I hear, I can understand that people that are married, not necessarily the church, but there are also mothers and fathers of the church that can also have these conversations even within their Bible group, you know, or their Sunday school class as well. So
Mhm.
I don't want to just limit the teaching to the pulpit, right?
Mhm.
Because although it should be there, right? But I also
Mhm.
know that there are other places that can also use that messaging, and even in youth services,
Absolutely.
right? Because youth are the ones that are going to be a little bit more naive and try to
Mhm.
be more adventurous or even try to see what it is. I know for me, because I had sex before marriage, and there was not really a guilt there. I just I was like, oh, okay, this is what we supposed to do because God's supposed to do this. Um, and not until I got into the word did I begin to be convicted when I did it. So I think that part of the conversation is missing of
Mhm.
of you need to why purity is the thing for men and
Mhm.
women, you know. And we talk about this several times, me, you, and I, about who's in charge of it, right? Who's in charge of the why is there so much sex taking place in
Mhm.
society now?
Well, yeah, again, we talk about the differences between men and women, but again, when we're talking about, I think each person is equally responsible for their own actions, right?
Yes,
So even
I
when
like
we're talking about purity and, why you shouldn't have sex and things like that, again, like I said earlier, I think a lot of pressure is put on the women, and not only are we put in a position to make sure that we mind our own purity and virginity, but
that.
we're also put pressure on to ensure and enforce the men to make sure that they have theirs.
Mhm.
So is a double thing. Like, it being in a situation as a woman, like the messaging that you always get is, well, if you keep your legs closed, or a woman can run faster with her skirt up than a boy can run with his pants down. Like,
Oh wow, I've never
those are,
heard of
you
okay.
never heard that? That's so old.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think it's that subliminal messaging that it's you as a woman's responsibility to ensure that you remain a virgin and ensure that a man doesn't, engage in sex as well.
So you think that that's a because I'm trying to think about it as if I think that's more of a probably a societal thing versus the church because if the church really doesn't talk about it individually uh,
Hmm.
as often from the perspective that I remember, and even because what I remember is that as far as being a youngster, that the conversation was rarely had, and then when it was had, it was told to both girls and boys to not have sex. Right? I don't. I think society it has played the role of in the past because it's not that way no more because you know
I agree, but I've heard like sermons sometimes where instead of the story being around, like, let's say, um men, they'll say men are weak, and stuff like that, and say, you need to gain control or whatever, something like that. But a lot of times the stories around that is about how women, I guess, weaponize sex when they're talking about biblical stories, things like that. So
Okay.
even in a church is still this stigma around women and sex. So you get that from a biblical, religious standpoint. And then in society, which, mirrors a lot of that messaging too, from, I guess, a patriarchal standpoint.
Mm.
So, and I think that's why a lot of women do struggle, especially if you brought up in a church, do struggle and have issues around sex.
Mm.
Um, like even after, like, I've thought about what does that, I'm trying to figure out how to not say it. You said we could keep it real, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So even around things related to masturbation,
Oh, okay.
things
Mhm.
like that, like conversations like that, you would never
Yeah.
have in church. But me just being curious in general, when I have, like, I've had conversations like this with my mom now as an adult,
Yeah.
which is
That's
one of the
crazy,
things.
isn't it?
Which is
Yeah.
one of the things for me, I always said from day one with my kids, because I remember how it was growing up, not feeling like I could go to my parents and talk about these things when
Yeah.
I had questions. It wasn't even like I was doing anything at that point. It was
Mm.
just curiosity, questions, wanting to know, things like that, but never felt comfortable
Yeah.
having a conversation like that. So with my kids, I made sure from day one that
Good.
not just about sex, but about anything. I wanted to build a relationship with my children where they could come to me with anything, like nothing was off the table. Um, and I did really well with that, like balancing between you guys feeling comfortable enough to come to tell me everything, but also understanding what we stood on. That's
Mm.
not going to change, but we could still have the conversation. But a part of that conversation is also letting you know what our stance is on that. Um, so
That's
we
good.
balance that.
That's good. So, would you say, do you believe that churches have taught women to be partners or performers?
I would say, hmm, what's
Interesting.
the word that I'm looking for? Yeah. Um,
The reason why I ask, as you think, the um the church is currently in general, right? Because there are some really good churches out there. They just don't get a lot of airtime. Shout
mhm,
out to ABC City. That's mine in Irving. Um, that a lot of churches are centered around women and how women feel. Um, and,
mhm.
and that's one of the reasons why men had been coming away from the church, right? There is not as many men in the church, and
That's
most churches
always been, though. I mean, women have always outnumbered men in church, but I understand
they
what you're saying.
outnumber they outnumber men, period. Right. But at some particular point in time, there was a lot of married people. Not a
Yeah,
lot of married people, but
agreed.
more people were married. So therefore they was going to church together more times than not. Right.
Mhm,
So of course there was more women, but I'm saying it's astronomically more women now. So
mhm.
the question, I guess that would kind of be centered around the question of what do you think that there if what do you think that the church is teaching women to be performers or partners?
I would say, he I think sometimes as a partner you have to perform. So that's why it's hard for me to to
Yeah.
separate to separate the two,
Okay.
because I think that occurs
Please
a
break that
lot.
down. Yeah, please break that down. So you saying a partner can be a performer?
Yeah, because
Well,
I
a
think
partner is okay, please break that down.
the reason I say that is I can say, so let's say, okay, so since we were talking about, sex earlier, I'll just
Yeah.
kind of use that as an example. So I know, and even in these spaces, we hear it a lot. But in the church, I remember growing up hearing, when I was allowed to sit in adult church, not the children's church anymore. Like as I became an adult, a lot of the messaging, like you said, it is catered to women. A lot of times, that messaging is about always the supportive role, right? As being the partner in the relationship, what it is that you're supposed to do. So, whatever it is that your husband needs, you need to be the one to fulfill that, right? And so, even when it comes to a sexual standpoint, the ability or the encouragement of not ever saying no, you know,
Mm,
um, at least in the church that I went to, was kind of the messaging around that. Like, don't withhold, things like that. Not necessarily with an intent for anything. Because I do know that you shouldn't do that, but just in general. So when I'm talking about performing, that is one aspect of that, because we're taught that you be ready when he's ready. And a lot of times that's that's not the case. So the performing aspect of that comes in. But I think performing, like when you guys say duty and performing, to me, I think those are kind of synonymous.
mm.
Um, because a lot of times when you're doing your duty, that means you're doing something that you really don't want to do, but there's an obligation to doing it. I think that's the same thing what performance is. You're doing things that you really don't want to do, but you're, presenting in a way that I'm in it and I'm gonna do it. So,
Interesting.
yeah.
That is interesting. That is. I see your perspective. I mean, the a person that is just doing it because it's their duty, I think that's to be respected as well, because they're pushing past self
Mhm.
to uh, love their spouse. So, for example, the age old analogy or depiction of the woman that's going shopping, right? But the man doesn't want to be there. He'd rather be at the
I
house.
was about to say, sorry.
He'd rather be at the house, right? He'd rather be at the house, but he goes, right?
Mhm.
So that's something to be commended for, just as the same as if a man wants to, I don't know, go fishing, but she doesn't like fishing, but she goes along anyway. I think that's is commendable as well. That's a part of the duty, right? Because as it relates to marriage, it's a covenant between two people and God. And so if you're having a situation where you're married and you have a covenant, then you're going to be doing things that you don't really like sometimes.
Mhm.
So, but I understand what you're saying. Go ahead. What you about to
So
say?
what I was going to ask you, what would you say is the difference between duty and performance? Because just like you said, I um I agree with you in terms of you moving forward and doing something that you really don't care to do. But isn't that what performance is? Like I said, if I don't really feel like having sex, but I know you want to, is that my duty or am I performing?
Well, let's go with the scripture. Like the scripture is 1 Corinthians 7:4. It says the wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. And likewise, the husband also does not have authority over his own body, but his wife
Mhm.
does. So
Correct.
based upon what the Bible says, it says, stop depriving one another except by agreement for a time, so that you
Mhm.
may devote yourselves to prayer and come together again, so that Satan will not tempt you because of your lack of self control, right? So if
Mhm.
I'm going based upon the scripture, then it would have to have been a conversation of why we're not going to partake in a sexual act, as opposed to one or the other saying no, I'm not going to do it, right? Because now that could get into an area of, well, we, the depiction of like, you don't want me, right? And now that goes down a very, very slippery slope. So I would say that it's a part of your partnership, right? It's a
Mhm.
part of your partnership, and but then I can understand, and the partnership comes from the contract, as it relates to the covenant that you said that you were going to be a part of.
Mhm. So
So
I just looked up, like how you said, Chat GPT work wonders. Because I
yeah,
sometimes I'll have a concept in my head, and then I'll just like,
yeah, it's
So
great.
one of the key things that it said is duty. The focus is duty is what should be done. The focus of performance is how well something is done.
Mm,
So that kind of it makes sense because
mhm.
I'm like, in my mind, I'm
What's the
like,
intention?
it's
Basically,
kind
what's the
of
heart behind what's the
how
heart
you
behind?
do it, right? So I
Yeah,
think a lot of times people are performing. Like I ain't gonna lie, when I'm tired and I just be like, okay, because I know you need it. The performance is very different.
that's funny for sure.
But it's true, you know what I'm saying? So I think a lot of times we do perform, not just as women, but within marriage. And
Yeah,
sometimes, it is because we're still human,
yeah,
So sometimes when it's about the duty, you do it out of obligation, and it's not that you feel like doing it right then and there.
mm,
But you get it done. I remember one time I knew I had to like cook dinner or something. I was just tired. And it was something that like I can't remember what I made, but my husband was just like, you didn't put love in it. Like something like that. I'm like,
yeah,
just be happy that I cooked. But that kind of reminded me of that. Like, as an example, is that I did it because I knew I had to cook, but I did not want to. I really didn't even want to eat. Like, I was just tired. So I
yeah,
just have something together just so you can make sure that you're eating. But for him, it was the performance wasn't on par,
yeah. The
but
heart behind
the
it,
duty was there. Yeah, heart wasn't in it. It
man.
wasn't.
Listen, when y'all make food from the heart, it tastes so different. 100%. So, do you believe that men have been taught to lead in love or just dominate by default?
I think dominance has always been default. And the
Okay.
reason is because love is a vulnerable aspect. And because men are not raised to be vulnerable, they're raised to be strong, they're raised to be stoic, they're raised to be all of the things outside of what vulnerability or love may take,
Mm,
right?
yeah,
And so I think the dominant aspect is the default. But I think the more that they learn to lead through service, it helps. It definitely helps. So I think, and I don't know really. I had a conversation one time with Marcus White,
okay.
um, in White, right? So one of the things he was saying is that one thing about Christianity for him, he was like, if he, was to get into religion, the religion that he would go to would probably more than likely be becoming Muslim. And he said the reason is because Christian men seem weak.
Interesting.
And yeah. And he was like, and when I look at how the Muslim faith, teach men how to be men, a lot of it has to do with, manliness and strength and things like that. Whereas with Christianity, it talks about being a servant and being humble and things like that. So he said that he would be drawn more so to that other side because it appeared to be much more masculine.
That's
Um,
interesting.
Yeah, yeah. I found it to be interesting, which then led me on, of course,
The question
just
you have?
to, like, just kind of like flushing that out
Yeah,
because I can understand that mindset because it just automatically took me to the differences in terms of strategy between Malcolm X and Martin Luther King,
right.
right? Um, and so I think that's another because that was one of the things he said. He said he thinks that that's another reason men aren't in the church like that either, because it seems too soft. Um,
Mhm.
but I I think that now I don't know enough about the Muslim faith to really speak on what the Quran says or whatever, but just in conversation with people who are of the faith, I can make that connection in understanding what he means by that.
Yeah,
Because society wise, like in that faith, like the man is expected to cover everything, like financially.
yeah.
Even if the woman has a job,
Hmm.
the man is still responsible. Like that money is for her to keep herself and do whatever it is she wants, but he's still expected to take care of everything. So I think men with the mindset of, it's a man's responsibility to protect and provide, and they take the provision to the point where, you know, I need to provide everything. I can see that alignment, with that. But I think what happens is, so what I begin to do is look up like scriptures, look up stories and stuff in the Bible that kind of aligned with what he was talking about.
Hmm.
And I happened to come across a video, and I ended up sending it to him.
Okay.
And it was literally kind of what he said. That's what made me say, let me send this to him. And that the pastor or whatever was like talking about how,
Biblical manhood.
yeah, like how masculine, that aspect is in terms of what men were charged to do, things like that. But he was saying that the church, especially if you're trying to draw men, need to focus on some of those things. So to get to your point about, you're saying that a lot of churches cater to women because there's more women there. So I guess the other aspect of that is teaching men how to be men and knowing when to lead with love and when to lead with, I guess, the masculine aspect of, what we consider to be more like stoic and strong and, that kind of stuff. Because if we're always talking about turning the other cheek as a man, that's like,
Yeah,
talking about serving, and when the world says that as a man you're supposed to be served, so how does that look, me serving others? How can I balance the both? Like, I don't know if people look at Jesus as being feminine. You know what I'm saying? Right. I don't think so, because you look at all of the things that he's done and can do, or even being in a situation where, by the snap of your finger you can, make it. But it's the discipline in yourself that you choose not to, and I think that shows an area of strength,
yeah.
as well. So, maybe that aspect of masculinity needs to be, push forth more to keep men engaged in church and knowing how to lead with love and then lead with, their masculinity as well.
I think man, all the things that you said are very good. I can see exactly what it is that you're saying and what is being missed when a person like M. White would lean more towards something that makes him more comfortable as it relates to being a man, right? But at the same time, I also can identify in scripture where men were the ones that were going to war, right?
Mhm.
It was the 12, there were 12 disciples. Those were men that were following after Jesus and going and proclaiming the gospel all over the world. Moses was a man that led an entire nation of people through the wilderness, even though he didn't make it or whatnot. But he led them to go up against Pharaoh, who was his stepdad, so to speak, or his, his however you want to look at it, right? And then you have Joshua and Caleb going into conquer the land because the other 10 was like, we can't do this. Now that was a weak move. I can see that, right?
Mhm.
And Noah, who built an ark, my G, you know what I'm saying? My dude built an entire ark by himself. So there are so many different facets in the scripture that shows where masculinity lies, and even when it comes to how to be a biblical man, that I also see that it's not talked about enough
That's what I
direct.
was about to say. Yeah, because even the stories that you just said, how is that expressed in a pulpit about teaching men how to be men?
That's what I'm
Um,
saying.
yeah,
That's the
yeah,
part that I'm saying. That I'm saying
yeah.
I can go to the Bible and see it, but I
Mhm,
said, but it's not talked about in a manner that is going to be kind of heard from an ear that compares it to Muslims, right? To the
mhm,
Muslim faith. Uh, and so, but that's not the reason why you should look to a particular religion either, right?
mhm,
So that kind of says where a person is if they're just looking to something that makes them identify more, right?
mhm,
So, but I
mhm,
get it. I
mhm.
get that part.
Well, you know what's crazy, which I didn't know. So, like Jehovah Witnesses, right? I happened to when I was working in a different county, my my direct, supervisor or whatever admin was sorry, he was Jehovah Witness. So a lot of times we would have these conversations, and one of the things that I noticed about him being a Jehovah Witness and being a man, and the conversations that we've had around manhood and what the responsibilities are as a man, I never heard a a male Christian speak about the responsibilities of manhood like he did.
Yeah.
It was very different in terms of like um before he got married, there were certain things that had to be in place prior to, according to, his belief within, being a Jehovah Witness, even in terms of how they had to date, um like ensuring that, like, a lot of times they went on couples date because of trying to ensure that nobody crosses boundaries. So either they would go out with other couples that were from the church when they would go out and date, things like that. Um, just in terms of how he's supposedly as a man. And even if he was interested in a lady, which he was at his church, that because they have elders, the elders were also involved in that. Even if, let's say, she was ready, the elders would speak and be like, he's still got learning to do. He's not ready for that yet. Like
Oh,
he
that's what the mother would say.
Yeah, like, so whoever the elders over the
Ah,
women,
okay.
and the men, so the elders would come together. Like, so let's say he was interested in a woman, he would let his elder know, and then that elder would speak to the, I guess, woman elder
Yeah,
about
yeah,
the person that he was interested in. And if she was ready, but that the male elder was saying that he's not ready yet,
yeah,
he's still got some growing to do,
yeah,
then they couldn't really engage
yeah,
much further in terms of trying to get to the pool, get to the, get married.
yeah.
So whatever it was, is that even if she was interested, she still had to fall back and wait till he developed to the point where they're like, all right, he's ready.
So you're saying that the woman stayed?
Well,
Oh,
I think he was further along at that point that he got approved, but he was telling me what the process was like because
I
that's
know.
what I was asking.
I'm just wondering, is the lady staying for him to
Oh,
move?
they got married.
Okay.
Yeah, they
So
yeah,
he
he was
improved, and
married.
she was willing to wait for him to improve.
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
a
I
really dope moment for her
yeah,
because
he was telling
that's not
me.
right now.
Yeah, he was telling me. He said, or vice versa, if he was the man and he was ready, but she wasn't,
Yeah.
then that elder would say, like, she's still growing. She needs more, learning to do in terms of being ready to take on the role of a wife, or is he ready to take on the role of a husband?
So what do
Um,
you think? Oh, let me listen. When you there, I'm interrupted because I have
mhm.
a thought. What do you think that the church should be telling men and women about their particular role in a marriage?
So this is a little, I say, challenging for me in a sense of just personality wise, experience wise,
Okay.
seeing things done in different aspects for different marriages.
Yeah.
So I think what happens is when we just use, let's say, I think there's a level of a bare bones recipe, right?
Okay.
Where you have to have these
Same
main
word.
ingredients no matter what.
All
I
right.
think a lot of times when we're talking about marriage, I would say in general, but specifically from a biblical standpoint, a lot of times that's where it stays, is the bare bones, like the basic ingredient that you need. But a lot of times, to make that recipe work the way that you need it, you might have to add a little more spice here, or this person may be a little bit allergic to that, so you can't put that in, things like that. So a lot of times when you're just hearing that a marriage is only supposed to be one way, and as an individual, I can't see myself in that, it makes it difficult. And I can only speak for myself.
Okay.
So I think, with that being said, the church definitely needs to talk about what the foundational aspects that every marriage is going to need. But then they also need to sprinkle in the other things, like, um what your partner might need versus what you want. How does that work? Or this is what we like, just basically saying you also have to figure out what's going to work best for y'all marriage in
Mhm.
terms of both of your personalities, in terms of the way you know work through challenges or emotion, or whatever. I don't think that extra, sprinkle is ever is always talked about, is always strictly talked about from the biblical sense of, like, when they talk, oh, Proverbs 31 woman, like that sense. But
So you don't think Proverbs 31 can exist currently?
do I think it can? Um, yes, but retrofit. Like, so
Retro so the Bible has to be adjusted. Please explain.
I
because
so
because I'm gonna tell you why. Because what I see is that women want a man that follows the tenet of the scripture. Like, in because if you look at how the men, a biblical man, he's a traditional dude, right? And that is what women want. That's what they say they want. However,
that's why I say it's retrofit, because
that,
it's
that,
not.
that,
It is, but it isn't.
saying, but that on average, that's what women are saying. They want a biblical man, is what they're saying, because they want a man that provides, protects, that looks out for how they feel, because that's in the scripture where you're supposed to live and dwell with her according to knowledge, to know your wife, getting to know her in those type of ways, and serving her as a servant leader, right? That's what she's expecting and wanting, right? But then it comes to a retrofit. Now, help me out. What's the retrofit?
Well,
from
that's why I say it would be both. It's not just a retrofit for women, but for men as well. Because if we're speaking like when we're talking about biblically or what protect and provision mean in 2025 looks very different than it did in
you
20
think,
AD. You know what I'm
please,
saying? Yeah,
please, because
the
I don't
reason I say that is this. So when
yeah.
we're talking about protection and provision back then, there were not as many um not as many technologically advancements. There were things in terms of culture wise that women could and could not do, different just in terms of exposure, development, in terms of change of culture, rules, like all of those things. So that's why I say to some degree is retrofit, because even for men, when we're talking about protection and provision, there that protection and provision looks a lot different today than it did back then. Like the provision, the women are also helping with the provision aspect. Men are not doing that on their own when we're talking about the financial aspect of provision. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because 9 times out of 10, when you're having these conversations, when they're talking about provision, they're talking about finances. And
I
that's why I
thought
say it has to be retrofit
that was
because
providing. I thought that's what providing was. Providing was about
correct. But that's why I said
provision.
it has to be retrofit because women are also providing to the household as well,
But Proverbs 31 woman was providing to the household.
but not necessarily more than the man. Some like if we're talking about financially speaking, there are many households that are growing where the women are the financial providers.
Oh,
That
you mean that they make more money. They don't make them the provider though.
Well, if there are things that if there's a home that needs to be purchased, if they're making the financial more of the financial money, a lot of times they are purchasing the homes. So yeah, you can look it up in terms of who has the higher ownership of homes.
Yeah,
It
that
women.
right, but that's they're single. They're not married. Like the when you talking about what I'm saying is that the Proverbs 31 woman was contributing to the household.
Yes.
She had a small
Women have
business.
always worked.
Right,
Yes.
that always worked and contributed to the house. There
Hmm.
has been this phenomenon of the stay-at-home mom is is a fairly new thing in some aspects because women have always worked in some regard, right? So what I'm saying is that provision, we're not going to create what people are saying. We're going to say what the word is. Like provision means that you have a plan for your family. That's the
Hmm.
small part of it, and then that's the elementary definition of it, and then the providing is a part of finances, and like
Hmm.
I said, that currently women are still wanting the man to be a traditional man, but they're believing that they need to do something different than
Hmm.
what a biblical woman should be, you know.
Hmm.
And I think that's the part that is missing in these church conversations, to be very specific about, listen, provision is this, men. It says in scripture, write the vision, make it plain so that you know how it should be laid out and what to do and how to get there. You should have your mentor, you should have counseling, these things in these nature, of these things of this nature. Then you talk to the women, you're gonna need to make sure that you're on board with his plan. And if you're not on board with his plan, then he probably not gonna he shouldn't be the one that you say yes to, right?
Hmm.
Vice versa. So I think that what is missing is that there are women that want a traditional man, but they're not willing to be a traditional woman. And
Hmm.
then on the other side, you have men that don't want to be traditional because of the fear of the divorces.
Mhm.
That's what it's looking like right now. Whereas if both people are,
That
go ahead.
goes with the retrofit that I was saying. A
Well, help
lot of
me out. Give me specific instead of a general.
So when you're speaking about divorce, right?
Yeah.
The like I think like the top three reasons for divorce, because some studies will show one thing, some studies will show another, right? So
Yeah.
typically is like infidelity, finances, and the other one is just something along the lines of like
Communication,
yes, like what was
infidelity, finances, and communication.
not communication, connection. I think that's what it said. I'm gonna have to look it up again. It wasn't communication. It was about them just basically no longer being able to connect with each other, right? So if you look at those top three things, I think those things are very telling of the society that we're in today versus what it was in AD. So that's why I was saying in terms of things needed to be retrofit, because even a woman at that time who was working, I don't think she was working at the same level as women are required to work now. So when you take those things into consideration, so me going to market, selling some bread or or whatever is very different than me having to
She said selling my bread.
you know, critically think all day, and because you can be even in your like just become mentally drained, because there's a lot of planning, there's a lot of how we saying technical work that you have to do, and then depending on what your field is, if you are a teacher or if you are a principal or administrator, those are very different types of work
Mhm.
that you would have to do, and then come home and still be expected to do cooking and cleaning and tend to your man and did it. But
That's what
then
she was doing.
if you don't,
She was doing
but then
that. It says in 31:13, she looks for wool and linen and works with her hands in delight.
but is that
It
40
gives
hours a
it,
week?
it,
No, but
and
it's
it
not 40 hours a week.
rises while it's
And
still night and gives food to her household and portions to her attendants. She considers a field and buys it. From her earnings, she plants a vineyard. She surrounds her waist with strength and makes her arms strong.
my grandmother,
Is good.
my grandmother,
Hmm.
they grew up on a farm. I remember going down there. They did gardening, they did all of the things.
Hmm.
But my grandmother was at home. She was at home. My grandfather took care of everything, but she was in the garden, tending the garden. She was cooking dinner. She was taking care of him, but she was not out doing 40 hours of outside of the homework either, even when she actually worked, because she didn't.
Okay. For the sake of, well, I agree with that. So let me push back on this. Do you believe that if women would change their financial requirement for a man, then they could achieve a lot of the things that they're frustrated about, so to speak? So, for example, a guy, if she's making 40,000 and he makes 60, they had $100,000 a year.
Yeah, that's definitely enough to,
Right.
yeah.
Right. That's a good amount, right?
Like,
However, do you believe that that is what the average woman is okay with?
I would say yes, because the average woman is not making 100 on her own.
They're not.
And average women are typically married to average men. So I think a lot of times we
What's
get
the
in these
average man? You talking about like finances? Right?
financially. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
What's the
So
average?
So average, well, it depends on if you break it down for black men or white
Yeah.
men, or men in general.
Yeah.
But if we're going through, like, let's say black men, because that's all who uh,
That's right. That's how you. That's how
I,
you.
I, because I'm usually in these spaces and we're usually talking about black women and black
I'm,
men.
I'm fine with that. I really want black people to win in this marriage space.
So unless it has changed, but the last time I looked it up, the average was about $53,000.
Okay, got it. I'm cool with that.
And then I think for women, black women is probably about 47, 48, somewhere around there. Now it may have changed, but because that was a while ago when I looked those stats up.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're looking at the average, working together, like you said, when you put that together, it definitely can provide you a lifestyle that is comfortable depending on where you live. Because in New York, that still probably wouldn't be enough.
Correct. But you're probably gonna make more than 60 and 40 in New York too, depending
Right.
on where you
Yeah,
work.
but again, like we said, the cost of living is also higher. So it'll, kind of offset like what we're talking about. If I'm making that same amount here living in, Georgia
We're
or
on the
something.
same page, but we just explain it to the audience. I got you.
But so I would say that in regards to that part, most people who are getting married are marrying average people.
Okay.
So, I mean, and just statistically, it's not enough of, the high end earners to go around anyway.
Right.
So a lot of times when we're in these spaces, we are always playing the videos of the handful of women that are talking about, oh, my man got to make six figures. I ain't going for anybody else that makes less than six figures. When in reality, once you leave these spaces, that's not what you see across the street. That's not if what you're living in the hood, you're seeing in the hood. You know what I'm saying? They don't
Or even
represent
in the
the
suburbs.
majority. Right.
And
And so they don't represent the majority,
they
but
couldn't.
we listen to the messaging and begin to believe that that's what the majority is saying. And that's not what the majority is saying. And even when you look at the stats don't support that either.
Okay, so then what you're saying is, so then how does the church handle that? Because I was talking to this one guy we at my church on Friday. Yes. We had a men's competition and hangout on Friday. There's probably like 200 to 300 men there, right? And we were just hanging out like a carnival for guys. That's really what it was. And this one guy, he sat down and he talked to me about what he really wants to be married.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say he's close to 30, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that he looks for a woman he can see himself building with for the rest of his life. And when he doesn't see that she would be that person, he says he gets out quickly. Right? Now, I don't know what what he makes, but based on his requirement, it doesn't seem like a really bad boundary. The question that I asked him why, and he says that he wants to have a legacy that extends beyond him, and he knows he wants to be married in order to do such a thing. And I talk to other men that are in a Christian space that say they have a hard time finding these women, right? But then you have women that say they having a hard time finding these men. I would say, how is it that they're missing each other? I also remember this one. I'm gonna let you answer. I remember this post where these ladies were talking about, listen, I'm not gonna have sex before marriage, and I need a man that's like the same, right? And there was a guy that was in the chat. I'm sorry, not in the chat. It was a guy that was on the thread saying, yes, I agree with that. That is me. That is where I am right now. None of them women even tried to connect with him from what I saw. Because I said it was probably about 20 women that had commented, and he said that. And I said, women, here's a guy right now telling you that he's willing to be on the same page as it relates to not having sex before marriage. All of them just congratulated him. When there was one right there in front of you that's willing to do the thing that you're saying you wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, yeah. You know what I'm saying? So I'm saying that I believe that the money thing, the aesthetic things, the things that are needed for a wife, I think that part is what is missing from teaching a woman to say, listen, it doesn't matter about his paycheck, because if he doesn't spend it well, it's not going to matter.
I agree. But so this is the thing. The reason I framed it in a context of finances is because, like I said, I think that's where the disconnect is, because I'm speaking from a societal standpoint, that
Mhm,
that's all you were required of men in
mhm. I was talking
in
about that.
in times before. So
Mhm,
a lot of times when you're talking about traditional men, that's the framing in which that traditional man is being viewed. And that's why I say it has to be retrofitted, because now that's not the only thing that he needs. Because a lot of times the financial aspect, many women are already providing that for themselves. So it's like, now, if I'm framing my manhood around finances, because that was the area that back in the day women did not have access to, being able to financially provide for themselves. So there was a built-in dependency on that need. So now that need is no longer there, right? Because I have means in which I can earn my own income. So I think some of that mind shift, I think this is where men and women are having trouble, is
mm,
because men still put that part high up on the list. And I'm not saying that women don't either, but that isn't the only requirement that they need when they're talking about provision. Can you provide for me mentally? Can you provide for me emotionally? Can you provide for me spiritually? And, I remember seeing something about how they were saying that back in the day, you had a community in which the community provided different aspects of those needs, that now we no longer have that community, and we're looking to each other as partners to fulfill every single need
yeah,
that there is. Yeah. And so it makes it much more difficult, because you're looking for that person to make you happy. You're looking for that person to provide for you financially. You're looking for that person to be a confidant. You're looking for that person to be your best friend. So it's just like all of these roles are now put up on, we'll say, a man that
mhm,
that did not have to play any of those roles before. So
yeah.
you remove the one role that I was solid in. I knew this was at least the one thing I had to do, and that made me a good man. Now you take that from me, what do I have left? And
I think that's
I think that's part of that struggle of wrapping their mind around, how do I still be a man in a different, and I'm not going to say a different way, but in a more broader sense of provision, understanding what provision is. And
mhm,
I don't think we have a lot of training as
mhm,
men. I'll say you. I
mhm,
don't think men have a lot of training in those aspects
mhm.
of how that transition into being a husband ahead of time. I think they begin to, if they can do the stick to it and through itness within a marriage, that's part of that development that comes along with it. Because I see a big difference in my husband in regards to that when we first got together versus where and who he is now. But again, that was that stick to itness that both of us had, that we don't want our marriage to fail. But there were times where we went through that I can't lie. In my mind, I'm thinking like, Lord, I don't know if we're gonna make it. And I don't know if he was saying the same thing, but
Probably.
there were those times. But once we got over that onto the other side, it was just like, it's worth it. I see
Yeah.
why. here, you know. Um,
That makes sense. That makes sense. I think that the what I was communicating is that, I think that some of the requirements that some women have are to say, I mean, to go to your point, to the statement that you said, well, women are saying, I already have the money. So, and men are like, okay, well, I don't know what else I can do because that's what I'm typically tied to, right? That's my manhood being tied to that. But then the reason why I would push back on that is because they're not actually making the money that they're saying that they're making that they don't need. Like they need somebody else to come along and help them.
so
So
then
it's
why?
a
So then
fallacy of
that
so
asks
it's
your question
a
about then
fallacy.
why are they afraid of divorce? Because
No, no,
she
I'm
done
saying
behalf for what? Nothing. Like
no, no.
if you're making 50 something and she's making 47, y'all pretty much making
But
about the same thing.
that's not what I'm saying.
So
I'm saying what I'm saying is I do agree that men do tie how much they make to their manhood. I'm not
mhm.
disagreeing. What I'm saying is that for a woman to believe that because she makes money that she doesn't need a man, right? Because she has this money, well, it's not really true because she's literally saying on average, I want him to fit my bills and his bills. So even though she's making $40,000 a year, her mindset is not for her to contribute, right? Her mindset is for him to also take over what it is that she has plus what he has. That's what's currently going on. And that's why I was saying that if on average, because I think marriage is
But what I'm saying is you're buying into the hype that I was talking about earlier. The
so I,
woman that you're describing is not the vast majority of women.
so
It's
then
not,
why
I'm gonna say speak specifically, it's not the vast majority of Black women. And the reason I say that is because out of all women, groups of women, Black women have been the ones who've been working side by side with their men from day one since we got here. So when we are looking at these women that are on social media that y'all see videotaping, us like, yeah, that's my money is my money, his money is my money, all of that. That's not the vast
you're
majority.
saying that that's not the vast majority?
That is,
You
I can
you don't think
almost promise you that it
that
is not the vast
so,
majority.
so then if that's the case, then why would a man be bothered that a woman made a certain amount of money, or if he made if she's making 40 and he's making 50, then why would she think that she's made enough money?
I'm confused by your question.
So for example, you said that a man doesn't when a woman is making money, and we just said that the average for the woman is about $40,000 and the average for the man is about 50, right? So the woman is saying, I'm making my money. You're saying that I'm believing I'm believing the hype, right?
Mhm,
And I'm saying the that the hype is if a man is ready to be married,
mhm,
he's looking for a wife. On the flip side, the woman has to want him too. And
correct.
part of that is the finances. A part of that is she's thinking he has to be able to provide for me.
Mhm,
And if he waits later, is also probably going to be a kid involved.
mhm,
And so he has to think, okay, can I provide financially for her and her kid and myself? Am I willing to do that? Okay. That's what he's thinking. Also,
mhm,
will she come along and provide, I mean, every man, whatever religion you in, wants a woman that's going to provide him peace, a peace of
mhm,
mind. Okay. So if she's not able to give him peace, which is what is currently, that's a part of being a wife is to provide that safe space for your husband, then how is it that I guess the question would be then, why do you think men are not reaching out to propose to Black women? If you're saying that the money thing is on average, is that's not an issue for women, but you're
So
saying it's an issue for men?
I absolutely okay. And I know so you know how there's certain aspects of manhood that you would say as a woman I would never understand, right? Because I'm not a man.
Okay.
So a lot of times I find in these spaces when we're giving you the female perspective and what's going on, there's a automatic like disagreements
I'm not
because
disagreeing. I'm trying to
no,
understand.
because I'm about to explain to you. So what it is this. So the question that you ask is why aren't Black men asking Black women to be married, right?
If it's not a money issue.
If it's okay, if it's not a money issue, that I can't necessarily answer that. I
Okay.
can go by what I have read. I
Okay.
think part of that has a lot to do with Black women. And the reason I say that is we've developed a system in which we've allowed men to have the cow for free. You have the milk for free without buying a cow.
Okay.
And that's strictly what it is the
Okay.
fact that I want the benefits of a marriage without the responsibility of a marriage.
Oh wow. Okay.
And for women, we have to take ownership in allowing that aspect, because now I think it has become more along the lines of me wanting the companionship over the marriage. So I'll take what I can get as
Mhm.
opposed to being alone. So when you are moving in, I guess, desperation or, things like that, you end up getting the results that you do. So Black men aren't marrying because they're in a position that they don't have to. And I think before they were put in positions in order to get access, in order to get these things, these are the steps that you had to take in order to do that. I don't think that is the case now. The other side of it too is I also feel like, women are also feeling a less necessity in this generation to get married. Um,
Mm.
so I know before back in the day, it was, marriage was your only way out as a woman in order to be successful, in order to be taken care of, in order to just live, right? Whereas now, not so much so.
Mm.
And so I've read that a lot of the balance between do I choose about my goals and aspirations and dreams that I see and have for my life,
Yeah.
competing with a marriage to a man and what we've been taught about you're going to have to give up all of those things in order to support his dreams, his wants, his needs as a wife. And so you have a lot of women who are okay with also just having the companionship while they're pursuing their individual dreams and things that they want for their life. So I also think that plays into the less marriage rates as well. Like, I get some fulfillment from my job. I do get fulfillment from a family. I do get fulfillment from a marriage. But once I get married, once I start having kids, if you're trying to be a good wife, if you're trying to be a good mother, you will rarely ever have anything left to give to yourself. And as a society, we promote that. um in terms of measuring, and again, this part is my opinion. I think a lot of times, especially for Black women, we measure how good of a woman they are by how much pain they can tolerate.
Wow, that's crazy. Mm.
So I think a lot of women are choosing to refrain from the pain. No. So I think so. I think both of those dynamics are at hand, and that's why we're seeing lower marriage rates. But what you do see is higher and increase in cohabitating rates. So again, I want the benefits, but I don't want the responsibility.
And that's what I had communicated to you several times before. Like I said, you know what, it's important. And I said this on Lapeef some months ago. I said, listen, men do need to have, discipline sexually. They do. Uh, I agree with that statement. And but then I said, but the information is out there that literally says what you just said, that the reason why men are not having to get married is because women are still giving up the goods. And
Mhm.
that's one of the main reasons that a lot of men, not all, right, but there are a lot of men would want to get married, right? Even back in the day, like I can't get no, I can't get none if I'm not married, right? Even though some was still getting it, but it was frowned upon, right? If that's what you was doing, and so that's the part of where the church has to come in and guide each individual or all of us as a collective and talk to us about discipline, as it relates to, listen, ladies, if if you're doing what God asks you to do, and men too, he is going to provide you with a suitable husband. More than likely, I'm gonna say more than likely, but it's an opportunity that when you're in line with how he wants it, even as a man, that there's going to be more positives than negatives.
Mhm.
If women would understand from the perspective based on what you're saying, that being a wife is why Eve was created, to be a helper to her husband, and to align it with how it looks from the scripture standpoint, as to go along with that, is when Jesus talks about us as individuals being the bride, he's paralleling the two. He's saying, listen, the church is supposed to be the bride of Christ, and this is how he treats the bride of Christ, right? And this is how the bride should be treating him. It's a correlation all throughout the scripture. And if I, as an individual, follow Christ, would be like, you know what, I don't want to follow Jesus, but I want to partake in Jesus type things, people would say you're a hypocrite.
Mhm.
And I think that if more women, I'm not gonna say all, but if more women would align themselves with the scripture, then if that's the type of man that they want, they'll be able to see when this man is not a man of God more.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you watch, and I'll say this, and then if you have something to say, you can finish up. There's a guy by the name of Tyshawn Jackson on
Mhm.
Initiated. Did you see he got did you see
Yeah.
the story?
I know. I only thing that I saw was that he did get engaged
Okay.
now. But he had been leading up to saying that he know he's gonna marry this woman that he had been dating and stuff like that. Yeah.
I would like to interview him. So if anybody's out connected to him, I would really like to interview him, uh, to help other men that are aspiring to be husbands, and also women that are wanting to have a husband, and wanting to be a wife, right?
Mhm.
There was a when he began to lay out some of the things that he did, or what his fiance or girlfriend at the time did. One of the things that she did, they were having premarital sex, and she came to him one day and she said, I don't want to do this anymore, because this is not good for us, or some to that degree. I want to be celibate until we get married. This is what he says. He said, you
Mhm.
know what, I was not for it in the beginning, but when I seen that she was for real, I took it upon myself to have the same type of discipline. And yes, this is her leading, you know what I'm saying? That's not a bad place to lead, right? If
Mhm.
you're going to be the stronger of the two in that regard. And what ends up happening is that he got to see what their relationship was really about.
Mhm.
And he said their relationship was so good. That was one of the reasons why he transitioned to want to marry her, because he could see what the discipline did for the both of them.
Mhm.
And not to mention, I wanted to ask the question, eh, how long did it take you to ask the question after she said, "We not having sex no more"?
Mhm.
Because that would have been a very good indicator to
Mhm.
help other women see that if he's not on board with you taking sex off the table, then he's a problem.
Mhm.
And so that is to say, a part of, and he was coming from a Christian perspective,
Mhm.
and it aligns with what you're saying. Yes, men got to be disciplined. However, women, if you take the lead, so to speak, in that position, you
Mhm.
will see and encounter a different type of dude.
Mhm.
That's just my perspective. What you
Yeah,
have to say
I,
about
I agree. I definitely agree with that. But I also think
Uh-oh.
men see, and I'm gonna point something out, and I know y'all can talk about this later. Because I know he's probably gonna address it later the next time y'all talk. But like I think part of the issue is that when men talk about, I'll say in a biblical sense, when well, women were created to, support, the man, right? Is that I definitely feel like that's also part of the problem. Is that that's the only value that men see in women. It's in relation to how they serve them. That's it. And so when you have like right here with Lost in Translation, Haylet, where he made the comment, the female perspective is never tangible, right?
Mm.
That to me, that translates to I don't see the value in what women do, right? Or what women is, because if it's not tangible, that means I can't see it, I can't touch it, right?
Mm.
And I think that that's the biggest issue that is part of this relationship war thing,
Yeah.
is that anytime a man talks about how good a woman is, it's about how much she does for him. It's how much peace she brings me. How well does she cook? How well does she clean? It's all under the guise of how much service does she bring to him,
But
right?
isn't that what we do for Jesus, though?
Now, now hold on. So when you say things like the things that women do are not tangible,
Hmm.
so in a woman's mind, the things that we're going to bring up that y'all say y'all don't even respect is the things that we recognize that y'all see as tangible, right? Because you don't understand. I'm not saying, when I'm saying you, please understand, I'm saying
Oh, I'm
generic.
just
Okay.
listen. I don't get
Um,
offended by
is
that.
that um so when they bring up things that can be tangible, y'all say that's not important. So it's like, what do you bring to the table? Well, I graduated from college. I like you start laying out your resume because those are things that are tangible. You can see. But
I
then
understand.
when you understand what I'm saying? So then the things that he would say are not tangible, you can't see, that's our superpower, but you don't respect it.
You talking about the
So,
college? You talking
uh, no, no, no,
about
no. I'm talking
this
about
college degree?
the intangible things. So he's talking about the perspective is never tangible, right? So that
Mhm.
means I can't see it, I can't touch it, and to me, that just rounds out to I don't value it enough. So what I'm saying is when we begin to say the intangible things that are part, like we turn a house into a home, right? That's intangible. So men don't really understand what that is. So I
Mhm.
can't value what I don't understand.
I
And
got you.
so So I think that's the other part that makes it very difficult about the relationship aspect, is because if I provide you with the tangible things that I've accomplished, you say you don't value that because you're being masculine. Men don't care about any of those things. And then when I do the intangible, you can't respect it because you don't understand it. So the only thing that you understand is how I serve you. So it's always that dynamic of how much you can either pull from a woman or a woman gives to you. So when you do say things like, well, that isn't that in service to God? Isn't that what God does? I mean, like but when you ask for a woman in terms of her needs being met, and I'm gonna be honest, this is why I think there's a lot of divorce. It's because men are looking for the tangible and not respecting the intangible. Women are not feeling appreciated because of how much the intangibles are done on a daily, consistent basis, and not feeling like they're being poured into return.
So give me an intangible that what you're referring to, because
So
yeah,
let me think. Um, I'm trying to think.
like
Okay, so
okay,
here's an example. So right now my dad is he's getting older. He's going through some changes, and we really do believe that he's has dementia,
mm,
right? Um, so this is well, no, I'll take that back. I won't even use that example. It's too personal.
okay,
So I'm sorry about that.
no
Oh,
worries.
okay. So when my mom and dad were married, he once he got divorced, he was able to see all of the things she brought to the table because it was no longer there. So
Hmm.
one of the things is my mom has always been I don't know, top A student when it came to English and writing and things like that.
Yeah.
And my dad has struggled with reading. And so once she left, once they got a divorce, he's come to us and say, I look back on all of the things that your mom did for me. One of the things that I do wish that I had used her for was to have her teach me, how to become a better reader. And I
Hmm.
didn't do that. Right. So that was something that was intangible. He couldn't appreciate it when he had it. But once he left and saw how important it was, because those were the things she took care of, then it's like, oh man, or when he got remarried, one of the things my mom would do when she would wash his work shirts is she would scrub out the collars by hand before they would go, in the wash. And he got his second wife, and she would just, take his clothes to the cleaners or whatever, and then tell him, your clothes in the cleaners, I need the money to go get it out. And so that was another thing. It was kind of like, well, dang, your mom used to, scrub my sleeves and my, collars out and wash the laundry. So again, it was those things that are not really respected until it's no longer accessible, it's no longer there. So that's why I say, like, a lot of times what men, and even if we bring it up, oh, we bring love to the house, or we bring, we turn our house into the home, we do these things. In your mind, it's intangible. You can't. So what do that really mean? We can't put that in numbers. We can't codify it. But when it's there versus when it's not there. You
Hmm.
know what I'm saying?
I
And
do.
those things matter,
Yeah.
but I don't think that they get as much respect or appreciation when it's looked at as your role, your responsibility. Plus, I can't quantify it. So
Yeah.
I don't really know.
Yeah. That makes sense. I just wanted you to put a specific on it, because when people are listening to generalities, they have to put
Mhm,
what they want to think on something, right? So
mhm,
when you say mom was reading or had a really good reading skill set, he didn't use it, and he didn't realize that he missed it. That's something that a woman probably, or most women wouldn't even say, this is the skills that I have from my degree.
Mm-hmm.
So I but I'm talking about a dude that's an actual husband.
Mm-hmm.
He knows that he needs to utilize his wife or potential wife skill set to build his plan, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, for me, my wife, I'm in real estate, and she helped push me to finish my real estate license, right? Right.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, this is being sponsored by Glenn's Housing. Shout out to my business, right? And so how I utilize her is that she's in the beauty industry, and so I can talk to her, and if she has clients, they could potentially become my clients,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that is a non-tangible that will that will it's in at some point in time will become tangible as it relates to finances. What I was referring to earlier, though, I was just saying that the 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 things that a man says thank you to is, and this is why I love you, I like you. That from a woman should be appreciative because he's actually telling you the thing that he admires and appreciates about you. And I was liking that too. Well, that's what we say to Christ. We the song says, we love him because he first loved us. I
Mm-hmm.
love that. I love the thing about God has he gives me peace. He gives me patience. He's faithful to me. And so I'm saying these are things that Jesus gives to us. The Holy Spirit gives to us. So for now, if the man is not saying those things, then I'm with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if a man is communicating the thing that he enjoys about you, then that, in my opinion, should be appreciative, or that should be her understanding that he is showing, the man is verbally telling you what he appreciates about you. And it is the thing that you do for him, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that is what she wants from him. If a guy is not doing the providing, if he's not providing a vision, if he's not protecting, that's what women want, right? Women want a man because of what he can do for her.
Mm-hmm. And I would say, to a degree, I would say what he can do for her, but I would say even more so how he makes her feel.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
part. That's what I'm saying. That's the part
right.
of, if a man
So,
is if a man is doing something for a woman, it makes her feel good. If
mm-hmm.
if she if every woman was able to stay at home because their man made a substantial amount of money, and she was able to fulfill whatever she wants to do, he just made her feel away, right?
Mm-hmm.
He just made her feel away. If he if he gave her flowers, that's still him doing something because it makes her feel away. If he complimented her on her efforts, it's still him doing something to make her feel away.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm saying that women require men do things for them, just like men require women to do things for them. And so I'm saying both should be appreciative that a person verbalizes what it is that they appreciate and like about somebody.
But see,
That's
this. I guess this is what I'm saying. A woman can see things in a man, and I guess like what Lou was saying is in it, the intangibles. And I think women live in the intangibles. Not to say that the tangibles don't matter, because absolutely it does. But when I am also contributing to the tangibles as well, it provides me opportunity to appreciate the intangibles. You understand? Like even just recently, I had to thank my husband. I ain't gonna even lie. I'm gonna put myself on blast. That like so he had left for about 2 days. He went to a graduation, and I didn't go. So he was in Arizona, and at night I didn't realize how comfortable I was with him just being in the house, like at night. So typically when he's in the house, I'll just go upstairs, I'll go to bed. Sometimes if I'm downstairs late, I might, check the doors or whatever because he's already upstairs. But for the most part, he that's just what he does, right? He makes sure the doors are locked, blah, 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 blah. And so he wasn't home and I was home by myself. And I just found it very difficult to just even go to sleep because like body next to me, like something I have to be touching him in some shape, form, or fit, a hand, a leg, something. And he wasn't there. He usually sleeps with the TV on, and I like having it off, but because he wasn't there, now I got the TV on. I'm starting to hear stuff. I'm like, wait, what is that? Like, and when he's there and I go to sleep, when I say I'm knocked out, like a whole I remember I fell asleep with a tree that went through our roof when I was younger and did not wake up. Like I go hard. But when he was not there, I'm hearing all of the creepy crawly things like in my head. Like, did I hear that? And so when he got back, I said, you know what? If I've never said this, I realize that you make me feel safe without me even realizing it. And I appreciate that. He's like, what are you talking about? And I told him, and he was just like, how y'all don't try to be like, yeah, but he's just like, yeah, that's what I do. One of those,
If you don't
one of
do
those,
it, other will complain about it. That's
yeah, but I had to thank him for that because again, that to me was an intangible that
yeah.
even I overlooked because in my mind, I
Okay.
take care of myself. I can protect, I can provide, like I got my guns, but none of that mattered with him, even though I know how to use it. I don't want to have to use it, like even though I have those things, it made me feel much more secure just having him there.
Right.
And I had to appreciate, let him know that I appreciate that. So I don't think it's only men that overlook it. I do think as women, there are things we overlook too. Um, but because so many of our things are immeasurable, that it doesn't get respected.
I
Whereas
mean, that's what I said. Yeah, I said that. I said that's a fair statement.
Mhm,
I was, and that was a dope story because I've heard that as well from my wife, and so I understand. I mean, and I don't like if she was to leave, it would feel the same way. Not necessarily a position um, of protection, but a sense of comfort.
mhm,
Is it would be the thing for me, and I'm
mhm,
I'm just saying that women need to know, have an understanding, or somebody need to teach them that when you make your food, you need to what he feels is the love that you put into the food.
mhm,
So I can cook, I can clean. Okay, cool. But do you do it from a position of love and
mhm,
respect? That would be something that if a woman said that to a dude, he would have to look at her differently. Like
mhm,
when I cook my food, like I cook it with love and I cook it in a way that makes you feel good about the meal.
mhm,
Right? And that is an intangible. Even though you have the food, but the love, you can't see it. You know what I'm saying? You can't see the love that's inside the meal, but you can feel it though. So
mhm,
that's an intangible. And I'm saying that you are right that there are men that do not value what it is that they have in front of them, or to know to value that, right?
mhm,
Because she could communicate that too, that I don't feel appreciate when you don't do such and such, when you don't tell me. So that's a communication thing as well,
mhm,
or vice versa. So this has been dope. I mean, me, you could talk forever, right?
mhm,
And you notice I didn't disagree with you a lot, mistaken.
mhm.
And so that's why
I
I'll be trying to communicate to you that I don't be really disagreeing with you most
mhm,
of the time. I'll be trying to show you the perspective of like where if women would do some things differently, from a biblical perspective, they would encounter a totally different dude. So,
Mhm.
and vice versa, and like I say, I talk to men. If I'm talking to a man, I talk to him in a very harsh tone. Women, I was raised by a woman. I've been married. I have daughters. So there is a disposition that I understand that I have to speak with. I
Mhm.
just believe that what it has come to, I think, is that women haven't had enough men communicate to them about what it is that they're doing wrong in a way that they can receive it well. That
Mhm.
they just kind of tune out negativity.
Mhm.
Sounds negative. That's just
Now,
my
I can actually, honestly, I can agree with you with that as well. I do think women take to heart a lot of things that when, there is, I would say correction or whatever word you want to use,
critique.
that um your critique or what have you. I do think for a lot of women they take it to heart and do get defensive, especially if they're a woman who feels like they are trying, right? um so at times, and I can admit that I have done that. I have absolutely done that. But I know at the end of the day, I'm also a very reflective person. So
Mm,
even if now my goal is to get to the point that I can be reflective in the moment and
yeah,
not feel defensive first, then reflect, then have to come back and apologize and say, well, I do understand what you're saying. That's the work that I know I need to do, in terms of my own accountability,
that's good.
is being able to do that in reverse. Um, but and I think it's because a lot of times what happened is that we feel like all of the good that we're doing go unnoticed, and you don't point that out.
Yeah,
But then when it's something that you don't like,
yeah,
then you want to critique it. And so for us, it's an automatic like, well, you saying something now, but you ain't saying that when I picked your shoes up and I put them in a cubby holes, or you left the juice out and I put the juice back in the fridge, like, so now all of these other things that we feel like, man, I do all of this all the time, and now you trying to get mad because I don't know, because I left the cup on the counter and this time you're the one cleaning the kitchen, and now, you know what I'm saying?
yeah.
So I think that that's part of it. But from speaking from a woman, what I have been learning, and especially being in these spaces, I'm learning to listen a lot more. And I'm finding the listening part has led me to the conclusion that there is a lot of hurt men. A lot of, because a part of the listening that I come to realize is not exactly what the person is saying, but it's what they're not saying.
Mm,
And living in that, I hear you and I hear what you're not saying. That perspective has helped me develop a little more empathy, um, because I think just like we're quick to say what women need to do, because I think that there's a more clear picture when we go to the Bible and say, oh, there's a Proverbs 31 woman. It spells things out, but you don't have a Proverbs 32 man. It's not
true though.
necessarily, well, when I was looking it up, it's not as clear cut as what is it saying here. You
Says
can
in
be,
the scripture, you supposed to live with your wife in an understanding manner.
okay, how long is Proverbs 31? Like how many, like the
All of all
checklist.
of all of Proverbs 31 is not dedicated to the wife. It's like part down.
I have to go back and look up some stuff that, because I did, because that was the first one of the, not first question, but that's one of the questions that I had, was, okay, is there a scripture in the Bible that's similar to the Proverbs 31 woman for a man? And then it was a book, I think, that was written that was kind of, I guess, somebody wrote that to kind of, I guess, coincide with that, but I ain't gonna lie, I didn't get a chance to read it, so I don't know exactly what it said. But in terms of my trying to look for it, I came across that.
Yeah.
But so one of
You
the
don't,
things.
you don't think the Bible addresses how men should treat their wives? Is that what you're saying?
No, I do. No, I've come across scripture that does say that, like, love your wives as Christ has loved the church. But
Mhm.
is that tangible for most men? I don't know. I'm not a man,
Yes.
so I don't necessarily know
Hard-
how you guys interpret it. But I do know they say, "I'll die for you," right? Like that. That's my role. I'll die for my family, and I ain't gonna say that that's an easy thing to do. But the likelihood of that happening is low on the totem pole when women are asked you to live for them and love for them. That takes a lot more work. And I think a lot of men don't understand what that translates into and what that actually looks like.
That's fair.
So that I guess that's the part that I was kind of like getting at. But like Lit be killing me because he's one of the men that I do respect what he says because he has the gift of gab. He has great the way he lay words out, make it sound like you're saying something, but you ain't saying nothing. No, I'm just joking. But like the way he says things, but even sometimes in what he says, I see some of the things that I'm talking about in a bigger picture of like being in these spaces.
Mhm.
But he puts a Christian bow on the end of it, but it's still kind of saying the same thing.
Mhm.
And I think he is a good person just from what I do know of him. So I would never, say otherwise. But I think a lot of times, even like I said, I grew up in a household where this was reflected in taking the word and using it to your own benefit as opposed to the way God meant it.
Mhm.
And I think that that's where a lot of my defensiveness come in too. Like
Yeah.
even when we're talking or saying things about the word submission or being submissive, I absolutely have a difficult time ingesting that word. I do. Even if my actions are showing that I have a hard time with that word just in general. And I know that's a personal thing. I know
Mhm.
that. But yeah, I
That's
love the
good. Hey, listen, I
conversation.
appreciate you coming on. Like, it
Mhm.
went longer than I thought it was going to go, but I appreciate the time. We are on break, so we got to sleep in a little longer, you know. And are you still doing sheet critique? Are y'all still doing that?
It's just when Miss
Whenever?
Shan be like, we do pop-ups now. Pop-up she can see. It'd be something that she done watched earlier this week that was on La Peep, or she saw something, or somebody said something's like, she'll call me and be like, this is the problem with me. And then she'll be like, you want to do a Friday show? So it'll
That's
end up
hilarious.
yeah.
Yeah,
So we
that
do
is
drive-bys.
okay. So then, where can they find you?
We are on the Lapeef network on Fridays when we do end up having a show.
All right,
You'll just have to kind of tune in,
all right.
but yeah.
No worries. I appreciate your time and enjoy your vacation
Yeah, you too. And it's always good chopping it up with you.
for sure. Until next time, we
All
out
right.
here.
Good night.
Deuces. Good night. Hey, it's your boy, Dr. Elijah Glenn. Hey, just to let you know, I am a DFW realtor out here in this Dallas Fort Worth area. And if you're looking for a realtor, don't forget to call and talk to me. You can Google me. You can email me at glenns@gmail.com. That is GLENNS houses@gmail.com. And we can talk about what it is that you're looking for in your next home. And if you have a home that you're ready to sell, call me. Until next time, we out here. Deuces.
The boy is dangerous.
thing that I like most about being a dad is that I see that I'm about to impact the world.